On March 30th, 1968, two young boys in Manhattan's East Village spotted an abandoned apartment building. Well, they looked at each other and raced inside to start exploring. But one of the boys had an uneasy feeling. He ran through the hallways and felt on each of the doors to see if any of them would swing open. Then finally one did. So he ran inside, looked around, and he saw two empty beer bottles, a pamphlet that said, "Christians, How to Avoid Hell." And finally he stumbled on a figure of a man. He was so frightened he let out a shriek, and his friend came rushing into the apartment to see what was going on. The friend looked at the body, and the boys looked at each other because they knew this wasn't just anybody. They knew exactly who this body belonged to, and there was something magical about it. Bobby Driscoll was the voice of Peter Pan, an Oscar winner at 13 and a happy kid. For years, he was America's and Walt Disney's favorite child star, appearing in Treasure Island and Song of the South. Well, Bobby was thrilled to be cast in the new Disney blockbuster, Lady and the Tramp. But then he got acne, and his voice became deeper. He was a teenager now. Walt Disney soured on Bobby and found him unappealing. So when Bobby showed up to work, the officer told him he wasn't allowed on the premises. Bobby became more frantic, pleading with the officer, until security lifted Bobby up and escorted him off the premises as the 16-year-old began to cry. He was humiliated. "I was carried on a silver platter and then dumped into the garbage can." Furious, Bobby tried everything he could to regain his stardom. He went to acting school. He even went to acting school, called Hollywood Professional School. It was a K-12 school just for actors. But everyone called him the Disney Kid. He hated his life. He tried theater. He tried TV. He tried to distance himself from his child star image by calling himself Bob Driscoll. Nothing worked. Then at 17, he discovered marijuana and then heroin. Then I started putting all my spare time into my arm. At 19, someone on the street called out and said, "Hey, look, it's that Disney Kid." Well, Bobby didn't like that, so Bobby pulled out a gun and started to beat the man. In 1960, a veterinarian was treating a sick dog for distemper when he heard a noise in the other room. So he came out to the reception area and saw a man in a ski mask with his girlfriend demanding money. Quickly, the veterinarian gathered what he could from the cash register and handed it over. But then he thought he recognized the burglar's voice. He listened, and he remembered something his kids were playing on the TV the other day. This same wondrous, childlike voice. Was he getting robbed by Peter Pan? Well, Bobby Driscoll was sent to prison in Chino, California, the same rough neighborhood where Ryan Atwood was from on the OC, where he was allegedly raped. And he lost hope in his final years. He spent them in New York with the Beatniks, with his final words being a letter to poet Allen Ginsberg asking for money. A few days later, those two boys playing in Manhattan found his rotting, unnamed body, and he was buried in an unmarked grave that no one's ever found because no one even knew Bobby was dead until 2 years later. Also, I don't want to hear it. Yes, I'm filming a movie in a hotel room and the only lighting was in the bathroom, so I am sitting on the sink. Add it to the list of things no one should bring up, along with that Musically box of necklaces from Dollar Mart.
So we heard that you liked Musically.
That was worse than the Dan Schneider toe pics. We all know the terrible fates of child stars, from Lindsay Lohan to River Phoenix to Casey Simpson. Well, TBD. But I was noticing a pattern from the people I knew and the older stars that I learned about. The girls and guys would often go off the rails in distinct ways. I started thinking how the guys would explode outward and get arrested or attack people like Gary Coleman, Justin Bieber, Bobby Driscoll. And the girls would have a mental breakdown or an implosion like Britney Spears, Mischa Barton, or Demi Lovato. But I was thinking about it and the story didn't quite fit. Amanda Bynes set fire to her neighbor's driveway, and Zac Efron and Daniel Radcliffe had very internal struggles with alcoholism. So I started thinking again about what destroyed these young actors' lives. And I figured it out. Child stars go off the rails consistently, over decades and through today, in one of three specific ways. So let's find out the three pathologies that I need to be careful to avoid.
Wanna be a desperate
first, fading fame. This is Bobby's story. As a young kid, you're on top of the world. Everyone knows your name. Here's Allison Stoner from Camp Rock explaining the experience.
At the airport, where TSA invites you to skip the security line. Then at the mall, the sales rep hands you a tote bag with free stuff, which draws attention from other shoppers who then recognize you and tell you how amazing you are and how much they love your work. You're 11, and you have no other reference point for reality. I remember one time I went to a professional baseball game, just as a sports fan, but then the pro dance team saw that I was there, and suddenly I was learning their routines and performing with them on the dugout for the entire stadium during the 7th inning stretch. At a different game, I threw out the first pitch. At a different game, I performed the halftime show. This became my norm for sporting events.
Also, I just wanted to jump in because as I was editing this, I realized, that's not my experience. I never skipped the TSA line. It sounds a little unsafe that all the child actors could just skip all the security lines. But more so, I was thinking, it was just so not my experience. I'm just amazed that, the fourth supporting lead of, Camp Rock in 2008 was so widely recognized by, the 60-year-old LAX security staff that they brought him to the front of the line. I didn't realize how big of a cultural phenomenon Camp Rock was for the boomers. Wow.
Then your star fades and no one's getting you coffee and you have to wait in the TSA lines with all the normies. Here's Darren Criss dissing Gaten Matarazzo with this all-too-real child star fate.
In 6 months, you'll be a flash in the pan. You'll be in line in Chuck E. Cheese. Don't you know who I am?
So the fading fame pathology, what is it? It's when a star used to be king of the world, everyone knew his name, they were getting all this attention, and then that goes away. And then he's not working like he used to be, and how does he grapple with that? So I'm going to go through the stories of the child stars who went off the rails, who fit into the fading fame pathology, and what went wrong for them. This pathology is so heartbreaking because it happens to so many child stars because you can't stay on that level forever. Some people avoid it, like Bridget Medler, and they switch and they become a PhD student who's also running 7 companies or whatever she's doing. She's like Elon Musk, but on Disney. On my Living History podcast, I had on Howard Hughes, one of the most successful and wealthy men of all time, who became the fastest man to fly around the world. His final years were spent alone, in a dark hotel room, rewatching his old flying movies over and over, remembering when he was king of the world. If that was the endgame for one of the world's smartest and most determined men, who became famous as an adult, imagine that fate for a child. Gary Coleman was recognized around the world on different strokes, but when he spent his money and didn't have anything left, he had to work as a security guard. One day, much like what happened to Bobby, a fan came up to him and teased him for not getting roles as an adult. Not a nice thing to say, much like everyone on TikTok calling me Ed Sheeran. Or this guy who said I looked like Norbert Beaver from the Angry Beavers. No, that's fine. I got a haircut, so now you'll have to switch to young Haley Joel Osment. Now, Gary Coleman, with all measure of proportionality, punched this guy in the face and knocked him into a gumball machine. That's what he's talking about, Willis.
What you talking about, Willis?
Speaking of Haley Joel Osment, who famously said, "I see dead people."
I see dead people all the time.
He was in The Sixth Sense. Haley Joel Osment was arrested just a few days ago, drunk and calling people Nazis and Jewish slurs.
I've been kidnapped by a Nazi, and you are
Same man, same. You black slave owner, you roundhead royalist. That was a niche one, if you get it, way to go. Lindsay Lohan also falls in this category. She said in 2013 the reason for her meltdown was she was trying to fill a void after losing her once Hollywood-dominating status. She admitted feeling lost when her career slowed, saying, "I didn't know who I was without being on a set." And accordingly, all of her notorious moments started a couple years after the peak of her success around 2004. 2007, she drove her Mercedes-Benz into a tree on cocaine. A couple months later, she was at a party, and her assistant was like, "Hey, Lindsay, you're getting a bit out of control. I don't know if I can be your assistant anymore. I'm gonna go." And she was like, "Don't go!" She's like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna go." And so her assistant went. Her assistant had her mom pick her up and started driving away from the party. So, they're driving home guess you're not Lindsay's assistant anymore. Then they looked behind them and saw Lindsay chasing them. They started to speed up and Lindsay sped up. Then Lindsay started going faster, bobbing and weaving through traffic until she was going more than 100 miles an hour. Terrified, the assistant and her mom pulled over, and Lindsay confronted them, went to her assistant's mom and said, "You are human trafficking my assistant away from me." Needless to say, didn't exactly win the assistant back in her good graces. Dr. Drew speculated that when Lindsay Lohan stole a $2,500 necklace from the jewelry store, that she had the hallmarks of someone seeking to get back into the limelight. Amanda Bynes admitted that she started using Adderall because she felt lost without the constant validation of stardom. A 2013 E! News report noted her desperation to stay relevant drove her erratic behavior, as she felt overshadowed by peers like Selena Gomez. In a 2018 interview, she admitted, "I didn't know how to handle not being the star I was." And we have to talk about what drove her to do that, because it's insane, and these kinds of challenges can really deform the minds of child stars. On July 22nd, 2013, Amanda wandered into the driveway of an elderly woman named Bonnie Bratton, wearing a disheveled blonde wig. Bratton described her as if she was in a trance. Bynes was carrying a red plastic gasoline canister. She started pouring gasoline on a cloth, and then moved over to Britton's dog and poured gasoline on the dog, while Amanda Bynes lit a cloth on fire and let it go in the driveway. The driveway immediately ignited, and when the old woman came out to see what was going on, she saw Amanda standing in the flames. The woman yelled at Amanda to get out of the fire, but Amanda Bynes just stood there, with her pupils dilated, staring at the woman. When the police finally got there and arrested Amanda and asked her why she did it, she just stood there with the dog doused in gasoline, shaking. Amanda Bynes was so far gone mentally that she said she doesn't even remember setting the fire, and she was in a psychotic state. Well, after this, she was put in a psychiatric evaluation and lost custody of herself. It's a very sad story, because all these stories are so predictable. They can neatly fit into 3 distinct categories about how each of these child stars go off the rails. So I made this video to recognize what each of these pitfalls are and how to avoid them in the first place. The final example in this category of the fading fame pathology is Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman starred in The Goonies, The Lost Boys, Gremlins, and Stand By Me, but not much after that. In his memoir, Choreography, he described the lack of work left him feeling worthless, in search of a scarcity of roles that eroded his financial freedom and self-esteem, pushing him towards substance abuse as a coping mechanism. He was arrested in 1990 for heroin and cocaine, in what many viewed as a cry for attention. He started making music videos like this one, with a drummer that does not hit the drum. Sean Astin was in that video for a second, and someone commented, "Sean Astin's a real bro." All this to say, these guys went through some really challenging times. Corey Feldman also said he made $1 million by age 15, but only had $40,000 when he reached 18 from what his parents had spent. Now, these guys' struggles is understandable, and they deserve help. They also deserve us learning why it happened so it doesn't happen again. This fading fame pathology also afflicted Miley Cyrus, Aaron Carter, Demi Lovato, Shia LaBeouf, Macaulay Culkin, and most famously, Britney Spears. In the 1950s, George Reeves was a superhero. Literally, he played Superman on TV and film. But then he couldn't get more work that he wanted after that. Work that kept him a star. And on June 16, 1959, he hosted a party at his house. Witnesses said George was laughing, having a good time, but then turned irritable. At 1 a.m., he announced he was going to bed. His fiancée flippantly remarked, "Oh, he's going to shoot himself." And then George shot himself. George was an adult when he became famous, and he still couldn't handle the fading fame pathology. Sadly, this pathology also claimed the lives of stars Corey Haim, Brad Renfro, Dana Plato, Jonathan Brandis, and Sawyer Sweeten from Everybody Loves Raymond. Of the 3 pathologies we're going over today, I say this is the most common one, responsible for the breakdown of child stars. And my heart goes out to the family of each of these child stars. But there are still 2 others that have different challenges and different causes. The second pathology is rising fame pathology.
Childhood is overrated. I'm ready for mine to end. I want to have agents and assistants instead of actual friends. I'll be abusive and emotionally stunted, but everyone will tolerate me. They'll have no choice because my face and my voice make them all so much money.
In the 1930s and 40s, Shirley Temple was America's darling, the epitome of innocence. But just like for Bobby Driscoll, that childlike stardom started to change with puberty. Studio executives had her wear chest binders to look young, and when they couldn't hide it anymore, I mean, she had been married by this point, 20th Century Fox dropped her like a lead balloon in 1949. Temple admitted to being bewildered by the rejection. But unlike Bobby Driscoll, she remained incredibly famous. So she was trying to find how to reconcile her new image when she was no longer a little girl. She noted the challenges of being everyone's little darling while trying to grow up. Reporters constantly scrutinized her personal life, and Temple mentioned the loss of a normal childhood and the pressure to remain perfect. What happens in this second pathology, the rising fame pathology, is a child star achieves remarkable success. They become a household name, and they constantly have to deal with all the pressure that comes with being this major figure at such a young age. But not only that, how to maintain that level of fame. They've probably been the breadwinner for their family. They might not have all the money they worked for, and everything they do, every mistake they make, they need to make sure things are correct, that they don't mess up, that they keep their image, that they maintain this major level of success that a lot of people, managers, family, parents themselves, are depending on. But sometimes they rebel against this and say, these boundaries are too constraining. I'm just going to throw away any kind of standard and do what I want.
So in the fading fame category, obviously you become a big star and then it goes away, and there are the problems with that. And then in the rising fame, you're a major star and you stay there, or you feel the pressure to stay there, or you keep going up, and it's the problems with that.
Daniel Radcliffe right here is talking about his struggle with fame and how it made him empathize with other child stars in the rising fame pathology, like Justin Bieber being constantly scrutinized, and how it started to lead both him and Daniel down a dark road.
There is like an awareness that I really struggled with, particularly in my late teens, when I was going out to places for the first time, where you would like feel, and again, it could have largely been in my head, but you would feel watched when you went into a bar, when you went into a pub, and then, you know, in my case, the quickest way of forgetting about the fact that you were being watched was to get very drunk, and then as you get very drunk, you become aware that, oh, people are watching more now because now I'm getting very drunk, so I should probably drink more to ignore that more. And, like, you know, so it gets into, you know, you get into it can affect your psyche, and you sort of have to, yeah. And I think that's something, as I said, yeah, there is no blueprint for starting young and working stuff out.
Right.
That's why, like, whenever people like having a go at like Justin Bieber, drag racing cars or whatever, I'm always like, yeah, but you know, I don't know, like, stuff could be super crazy for him right now. I don't like it.
There's an empathy because unless you're on that side of it, there's no way you can understand it.
You don't quite know how kind of overwhelmed it's possible to get in it, or to, you know, and it's also, part of the thing is the expectation that you should just be delighted all the time. You know, you have a great job, you're wealthy, you don't have a right to ever feel sad or to not be like excited about the whole thing all the time. And I think that's a pressure as well, because if you suddenly start to feel like, man, if I am just feeling some human emotion of sadness, does that mean I'm doing this wrong? Does that mean like I'm not good at being famous or not good at, you know, living my life? And then get trapped in it, and then in some cases you've become the breadwinner for your family, or the hyper, and so an infrastructure of people is relying on you to keep doing this job that you might have got into when you were 8 and now hate, but now you would be letting so many people down if you didn't do it.
This really reminds me of cancel culture. Do you remember, like, a couple years ago when if you said one thing wrong or used the wrong word in certain circles, you would be totally condemned? Here's Bill Maher talking about it.
Take Mr. Emmanuel Cafferty. He was a San Diego gas and electric worker, but he got fired because someone reported him making a white supremacist hand gesture outside the window of his truck. But he's not a white supremacist, he's Latino. Always looking over your shoulder about getting ratted out for something that actually has nothing to do with your character or morals. Think about everything you've ever texted, emailed, searched for, tweeted, blogged, or said in passing, or now even just witnessed. Someone had a Confederate flag in their dorm room in 1990 and you didn't do anything? You laughed at a Woody Allen movie? Andy Warhol was wrong. In the future, everyone will not experience 15 minutes of fame, but 15 minutes of shame. And 62% of Americans say they have opinions they're afraid to share. 80% of Americans, young, old, rich, poor, conservative, liberal, white, minority, all hate the current atmosphere of hypersensitivity. Yeah, everybody hates it, and no one stands up to it. Because it's always the safe thing to swallow what you really think and just join the mob. So if someone asks you if Justin Timberlake owes Britney Spears an apology for not being a perfect boyfriend when they were teenagers, just say yes. Easy, as Justin did, issuing an abject apology and then vowing to return sexy back to where he found it.
And Obama, too.
This idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities.
Well, I feel like these celebrities of the rising fame Pathology felt that, but for everything they did, you know, whether it was political or not. They were just constantly being watched, and they had this pressure of being an A-lister as a child for so long. The ordinary person might feel worried about getting canceled, but for these stars, they basically had that fear for every part of their life. Like, for example, Justin Bieber, one of his scandals, I was going through Justin Bieber scandals, and one of the scandals is like that he egged his neighbor's house. And to be fair, it does seem like this was a particularly bad case, caused a lot of damage, and, you know, that's bad. But, like, most people I know have done that. Like, not exactly, but it's crazy that one of the scandals that he's dogged with is a normal thing that many, many high schoolers do. Do you see this sort of connection of cancel culture? Because in cancel culture, people would get canceled for just normal things that people would always say. Like, here's another great iteration of it's become a meme, you know, for sibling Zoomers to look at each other when they hear their parents say something that would totally get them canceled. Maybe it's an out-of-date term or some kind of complaint, and the kids know that they would be so canceled. But the kids obviously don't want their parents to be canceled. I'm not like gonna tweet out and broadcast to everybody, hey, my mom said this culturally insensitive word. This is what my parents said. You should cancel them. But those same kids will join in the dog pile of a celebrity who said the same thing, who got canceled. And in the same way, the same high schoolers who have egged somebody's house once or know someone who has will attack Justin Bieber for having done the same thing. And the same thing goes for his insensitive use of language with Anne Frank or bad racial jokes. It's like, I mean, to be fair, he didn't really go down hard for these. It was a little before cancel culture, but nonetheless, we've all done things like that if someone had access to every part of our lives, we'd all get canceled for. And yet, these celebrities in the second group pay the brunt of it because they're in this rising fame second Pathology. They're the scapegoat. Here's another wrinkle. I bet a bunch of the celebrities in the first group, the fading fame Pathology, did a bunch of the stuff that people in the rising fame Pathology got canceled for, but they were so irrelevant that it never came to light and they never faced that scrutiny. When you're in the second Pathology, everything around you is so focused on your success and maintaining that you don't put one step out of line. It's almost like you have to be constantly vigilant, almost like Tommy in the Goodfellas, looking for disrespect from anyone around him.
Really funny. I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Now that said, Justin Bieber did do some more serious stuff, such as getting a DUI and all-around persona switching, spitting on fans from a balcony, urinating in a mop bucket. And of course, this comes in the context of having had to maintain a squeaky clean image as a 13-year-old teen star who never does so much more than kiss and hold hands with girls in his music videos. Bieber described feeling like, I was living someone else's life and struggling with the loss of normalcy, which fueled his erratic behavior. And couple this with the additional pathology of no one around you wanting anything except you to become more successful, to make them more money.
His schedule was relentless. Endless promotion, constant travel, late night appearances, and no room for breaks. To make matters worse, adults regularly cross boundaries with him in ways that would trigger immediate outrage today.
And you're not having friends your own age to mess around with without any kind of fear. And you'll just want to tear down all these rules and structures around you, which is what he did, right? He was so scrutinized he felt lost and used substances to numb the pain of his chaotic life, in a quote from him. So he just decided to go the complete opposite direction and blow off all the kinds of chains that were holding him down to any kind of behavioral standard. So in rebellion, he's gone from having such a higher standard to the average person to completely casting off the idea of standard. So suddenly he has a lower bar than just the average person, at least according to himself, and so he'll just do whatever he wants and go crazy and rebel against all that constriction. Or I think about the Rumspringa, TikTok's favorite people, the Amish, when they finally reach that few months where they can do whatever they want and not live the Amish lifestyle, right? They go crazy, they party, they do all these things that if you've grown up with that, you're not gonna like spend any given few months doing crazy things. And now I gotta add an update because as I was editing this, I found out that there's been a lot of troubling signs coming out of Justin Bieber. Even some legal experts claiming that it might be enough to put him under a conservatorship.
There's something deeply unsettling about watching someone unravel in real time. The vacant stares, the erratic behavior, the desperate attempts to appear normal that somehow make everything seem even more off. Since stepped out on stage to accept an award, then 40-year-old actress Jenny McCarthy outright assaulted him.
I feel violated right now. Wow.
Can you imagine if the genders were reversed? Afterwards, Jenny was asked about what happened in some interviews, and she seemed almost proud about what she'd done.
I did grab his butt. I'm single. I couldn't help it. He was just so delicious. So little. Just,
I just got to neck Justin Bieber and grab his butt.
I saw that you like totally, like it was like a full-on almost makeout session.
A little cougar scary.
Yeah.
But I took the opportunity in the window, considering I'll never get to do it again, and kind of molested him.
So all this stuff that we're talking about suddenly feels even more viscerally relevant now.
This was also the case with Zac Efron, who struggled with the attention and scrutiny from his meteoric rise to fame from High School Musical. He also dealt with the pressures of being known as the Disney kid and saying he wanted to break out of that mold. So he turned to drugs and alcohol and went to rehab. He felt the pressures of fame, including constant public judgment and the demands of maintaining a polished image, which contributed to his struggles with anxiety and addiction. In a 2014 Hollywood Reporter interview, he discussed how his insecurities and the need to escape the spotlight led to unhealthy coping mechanisms and the difficulty of navigating fame as a young adult without a strong support system. Here in the rising fame pathology, you see child stars who maintain amazing success and have the constant pressure of maintaining that success by everyone around them. So they can't be a kid. They have to constantly worry that they're doing the right thing for their career, for their manager, for their parents, and not doing anything that'll violate their image. And sometimes that results in them throwing off the shackles and going completely off the rails in order to shake all that's restricted them and restrained them for basically their whole life. Our final famous tragedy in the rising fame pathology is Judy Garland. She was always very famous and always felt the intense pressure of maintaining her Hollywood charm, her Hollywood darling image. When she was fired by MGM, she tried to kill herself. She was trained for this hyper-fixation on maintaining her lovable status from an early age. Her mom gave her drugs to keep her performing well, and studio executives gave her amphetamines to stay skinny. She internalized this mindset, making a lethal combination, more so than anyone else in this category so far. She became addicted, got married 5 times, and attempted suicide 20 times. She felt she was only valued for her performances, but particularly what got to her was being called the ugly duckling by studio executives. She gave this hypersensitivity to any negative comments about her. You can imagine someone really prideful. When you ask them a question, they get really upset. In the same way, Judy Garland was so insecure that she was constantly looking for reasons that she wasn't worthy. When she was nominated for an Oscar and she lost to an amazing actress, Grace Kelly, she was devastated. In her defense, she had just given birth and she was recovering from having a child in the hospital room, and in comes a camera crew to film her reaction. Let's go, Judy. We're excited for you to win, Julie. And when she lost, they just walked away and left her there alone. With a child, of course. In the rising fame pathology, she needed to please people's expectations from her, and she was shattered when she disappointed them. In this pathology, guys are more likely to just rebel against the whole system and do crazy things like Justin Bieber, whereas girls like Judy Garland are more likely to fall into the trap of internalizing all of this pressure and all of these expectations they've gotten for their whole life. And it was, of course, the studio executives and her parents who instilled this mindset into Judy Garland from a young age that she internalized and never got rid of. Her mom and the execs teamed up to force her to get an abortion when she was a teenager so they could make more money from her. And they told her it wouldn't be good for her image to have a child. And sadly, this carried over to her husbands. Her 5th and final husband, Mickey Deeds,
echoed her childhood in forcing her to perform relentlessly despite her fragility and having her make more money. Oftentimes we marry the people that treat us like our parents do. Intoxicated, disoriented, and broke, Judy Garland ended her career for $100 a night performances in dive bars and clubs. One particularly egregious performance in London led to heckles and boos from the audience. She was devastated by the negative reception, as she craved the adoration that had defined her earlier career. Her husband, Deans, found her overdosed in their house for the final time on June 22nd, 1969. I'd say this category is the second most common pathology, the rising fame pathology. Another example who falls into this is Macaulay Culkin, and tragically, one who lost his life to it is River Phoenix.
I wanna have a teenage Hollywood meltdown, be a pop culture casualty. I want a bunch of addictions to illegal prescriptions and completely lose touch with reality. I wanna squander everything I've worked for and spiral out of control. I wanna wake up in Van Nuys with a bunch of sketchy guys I've never even met before.
Our final pathological category is sexualization. The third, final, and least common of these three pathologies is the hypersexualization of young child stars, almost always girls, and the problems they face because of it. Mischa Barton started acting at age 8, and how exciting! At 13 was cast in the movie Pups. In the film, she had her first on-screen kiss, which was also her first kiss in real life, performed in front of a whole crew, in a scene where her character had her first period, something she hadn't yet gotten in real life. The film was a massive hit in Asia, and she became a sex symbol at 13 over there, which she said made her deeply uncomfortable. But that was just the beginning. She then landed the role of Marissa Cooper on The OC at 17, where she was portrayed as this innocent, virginal, rich girl dating Ben McKenzie's character Ryan Atwood. In the show, the two start having sex, and she felt pressure to lose her virginity in real life because her character had. And at 17, she started dating Ben McKenzie at 25, with him and Peter Gallagher, who was in his 50s, commenting on how pretty she was. Barton compared the paparazzi she faced to the Hunger Games. She was constantly harassed with cameras, and this triggered panic attacks, and according to her, PTSD. Gossip outlets like Perez Hilton called her fat or too skinny. In her words, "She's too skinny, she must be sick." Then it was, "She's too big, I was never the right weight." Her publicist urged her to sleep with Leonardo DiCaprio at 18 to boost her career. Then she got a DUI in 2007 and allegedly overdosed at a 4th of July party in 2006. When she admitted to People magazine that she was part of this out-of-control partying, she said it was driven by the need to cope with fame. In 2009, she took so many Xanax, she blacked out and threatened to kill herself, which she called straight out of Girl Interrupted. And in 2017, she was hospitalized again for incoherently yelling that her mother was a witch and the world was shattering, all while she was naked and hanging over a picket fence. And she claimed it was because she was given the date rape drug, GHB. And in 2017, two of Mischa's boyfriends tried to extort her and release unconsensually recorded sex tapes of her online, not to mention the constant creepy messages she would get from men. Regarding her sexualization and harassment, she told The Times, "You can go to therapy every day for the rest of your life, but there's just a certain amount of trauma that just doesn't go away overnight." So clearly, Mischa Barton had a terrible time being sexualized at a young age. But then something strange happened. Barton embraced this sexualization in 2011 with a photographer named Tyler Shields and in some very provocative music videos. In 2009, British newspapers published a countdown to Emma Watson's 16th birthday, implying that was the day she'd become legal for sexual interest. On her 18th, paparazzi took photos up her skirt, which she described as humiliating. In 2016, she felt like she was being watched all the time. She then rejected roles that she thought would sexualize her further because of all the damage this sexualization had caused her. And in her feminism advocacy, she said she was more than just a hot actress and sued paparazzi for taking these photos. But then something strange happened, just like with Mischa Barton. In 2017, she decided to take a very sexually provocative photo shoot with Vanity Fair. What's going on? We'll see if this pattern of these young girls being sexualized as stars from a young age and being really uncomfortable by it, to then deliberately sexualizing themselves, comes in our next few examples. Miley Cyrus, okay, she complained about being sexualized as a teen on Hannah Montana, and then she felt pressured into doing a suggestive photo shoot in 2008 with Vanity Fair. She said she was just a kid and didn't know what she was doing, and that Disney's wholesome image clashed with what she felt were media expectations to be sexy. And then, of course, perhaps more than anyone else in this video, she famously sexualized herself to an extreme degree, famously twerking and wearing very revealing clothing at music videos and award shows. Well, that's another example of this pattern. Britney Spears called the record executive's push to sexualize her image while staying virginal being confusing and damaging. Lindsay Lohan felt her sexualization was invasive, and she felt uncomfortable in her body and a pressure to be sexy. Billie Eilish said she was disgusted by the gross online comments about her body, saying that she was a kid and people were sexualizing her, noting countdowns to her 18th birthday. Yet in 2021, she started wearing very sexualized clothing, including corsets, and wanting to show her body on her own terms. Britney Spears started sexualizing herself when she was an adult in her 20s with Toxic and I'm a Slave for You in order to take control of her sexuality that was exploited as a teen. And of course, Lindsay Lohan, too, embraced a sexualized image in her 20s, posing for provocative photo shoots, including Playboy, and playing a stripper. And she didn't exactly claim this was to reclaim the sexuality that was exploited when she was a kid, but she said she was doing it to align in part with this party girl narrative that had been crafted around her. Why would she do that? So here's a really interesting phenomenon. Every girl that we've looked at, and I haven't seen a counterexample, who have demonstrated a terrible hypersexualization from a young age that they felt was awful and exploitative, as even at age 13 in Mischa Barton's case, and that it made them lose a sense of their self-image and that they were nothing more than an object. They all, then in the name of autonomy, decide to do the exact same thing to themselves. And this is really interesting because I've looked at these interviews and these stars, for the most part, maintain that they have these struggles with body dysmorphia and depression and negative self-image and self-harm. Sometimes this sexualization pathology results in external outbursts, like with Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears, or more commonly, depression and body dysmorphia and personal struggles, like with Billie Eilish and Mischa Barton. But if I'm going to be honest, I can't help feeling like these girls have been so afflicted in a culture that prioritizes autonomy and volitional will, that they've chosen this pathology that they themselves have said is so bad for them, that has hurt them so much, but they've decided that it's different if they do it to themselves. Like if somebody was electrocuting you and then you said stop, and you ripped the machine from their hands and started electrocuting yourself because you've reclaimed electrocution. It reminds me of Justin Bieber and the rising fame pathology, where Justin Bieber felt so constrained by what he felt were these expectations on his image that he went totally the opposite way. This is sort of a different thing, but these girls faced all this mounting pressure that some of them just burst, and the only thing that they knew their whole lives that had been instilled in them was the sexualization, and so they just claim it for themselves. A lot of what I feel like is happening is kind of what happened to Judy Garland, but on a smaller scale. So Judy Garland, remember, she internalized this image everybody around her had, and she felt like she had to please the public, and she thought she had to continue to do this when she was an adult and never let go of that mindset. And it seems like that's often the case for the girls who fall into the third pathology, that they've gotten their whole self-worth from being these sexual beings from a young age that they said was terrible for them. And then when they're an adult, it's all they know, and in order to please the media or whoever it is around them, or to keep that sense of self that had been so deeply instilled in them that they think it's their own, they keep doing the thing that they said was so harmful to them, and none of their symptoms go away, at least according to them.
Another point I was thinking about was even if these girls are choosing to do this themselves, they still have all the pressure and expectation put on them by the media and society and a competition to stay relevant. And since they are, more closely associated with some pathologies of the rising fame category, well, it would make sense that, if they don't maybe sexualize themselves or something, they might see other colleagues getting more work or having more success when they do that. So I think that confluence of factors can also really impose on their
volitional decisions to do the same thing to themselves that they said was so damaging.
But these are just my thoughts, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the most feminist thing to do is say, yes, Bella Thorne, you go on OnlyFans. Yes, Denise Richards and Denise Richards' daughter. You guys do OnlyFans together. But I'm largely going off of what these girls have said themselves, that they found this young sexualization as a terrible experience and that they're struggling with their mental health and depression and outbursts. And if they're just reclaiming this pathology that affected them so negatively, I wonder what they think's going to change. If you're doing it to yourself, it might be even worse. Okay, one addendum I want to add to this section is in the third group, sexualization pathology, there is a little element of rebellion too. Because if you guys remember in the late aughts and early 2010s, that the Disney Channel had their main stars put on these purity rings. Like the Jonas Brothers and Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez would put on this ring, pledging that they were gonna wait to have sex until marriage. Which for me, as someone who missed this, I don't know if I was busy watching Dan Schneider or something, it's just so bizarre. I'm not even saying it's good or bad, but I could just never imagine Nickelodeon coming to the Harper Quads and saying, Nikki, Ricky, and Dickie, pledge your eternal virginity to the great executives at Nickelodeon. In fact, South Park made fun of the purity rings and Disney Channel portraying them, and they claimed it was a marketing tack to subliminally sell sex to young kids and make them think about sex and these young stars and how attractive they are, while showing to the parents that they're all about purity.
Look, we just want our concerts to be about our music, and not about purity rings.
Oh gosh, fellas, let me explain this to you one more time. You have to wear the purity rings because that's how we can sell sex to little girls. Then you have to wear purity rings or else Disney Company looks bad.
Well, we don't want to be selling sex to little girls anymore.
Don't talk to me like that!
The Jonas Brothers have come out and said the whole thing was a bad idea. There was a media frenzy when they stopped wearing them. Demi Lovato said she felt it exacerbated her struggle with sexual assault. And Selena Gomez said she wasn't embarrassed about removing hers, emphasizing personal choice over Disney's influence. So that can be a factor too, but I think mainly what's really sad to see is so many of these girls jumping into what they said was so damaging for them. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know if I am. I'm sure you guys will. I'd also like to add 2 tragic cases of Drake Bell and Ricky Garcia who faced horrible, direct sexual abuse in really heartbreaking cases. One difference in their stories is, as guys, they didn't exactly have the avenue of sexualizing themselves in the way that the young girls had, and so they haven't had to continue that struggle. They both faced major, major trauma, and they continue to struggle from it, right? Drake Bell was a missing person for a while, Ricky had some real personal struggles, but they both seem to be doing better. And I'm not sure I can really say the same about Britney Spears, who's continued to practice what she said hurt her so deeply.
Every night I lie awake, dreaming of my big break. I just gotta act and dance and sing, 'cause I only ever wanted one thing.
Through my research and life experience, I really do feel that these are the 3 ways that child stars go off the rails. For as long as there have been modern child stars, from Shirley Temple to Jake Lloyd, who played Anakin Skywalker and beat his mom. Of course, this is about child stars whose child stardom had an impact on their decline or outburst. So I'm not counting guys like the kid with a really small role in Diary of a Wimpy Kid who killed his mom and then tried to assassinate Prime Minister of Canada Justin Trudeau. Or Adam Hicks from Lemonade Mouth and Pair of Kings, who started robbing old ladies at gunpoint. Although acting may have been tangentially related, it was really brought on by the incarceration of his brother and the passing of his mother. And also, I want to say, a lot of the harmful behaviors done by these child stars or former child stars, I'm not saying they're wholly to blame. Like, a lot of them have gone through some hard stuff. Not trying to say it's okay to rob old ladies at gunpoint, but a lot of these figures are worthy of sympathy, while acknowledging it's not cool to burn alive your neighbor's dog. Now, am I going to be the next person on this list? Will I learn from this video? Will I learn from these 3 pathologies and avoid them? We'll see. Okay. What is kind of sad is Jake Lloyd, who I mentioned earlier beat his mom and is having a lot of schizophrenia and struggles with addiction, was told, a bit about the stereotypes of child actors and to watch out in an interview here.
Child stars have had a bit of a they get a bit of a reputation that they turn to, you know, a life of drugs, so may the force be with you.
Oh, well, thank you.
But that didn't stop him from falling down that road, so maybe next time you guys will see me, I'll be selling crack in the streets of Washington, or my toe picks from Dan Schneider. Do you guys think I really got this right, or is there something you want to add to my 3 categories? You guys, of course, always have the most shrewd comments, so I'm excited to hear your feedback. Some comments I've liked from these last 2 video essays. Haley, S5224, who has hope. You know, she thinks maybe I won't turn out like all the child stars on crack, and that I'm a well-learned and developed adult. I hope you're right, Haley, but this may be my last video before I'm dead in a hotel. I'm in a hotel. I got the hotel part. Oh, I love this one. My Dan Schneider video, I said, you guys probably don't know who Gary Coleman is because he was a star a long time ago. And someone commented, I'm old. I know who Gary Coleman is. Who are you? Also, I mentioned Craig Ferguson in the last video, and Craig Ferguson comments. And I said, hi, Craig. And he said he hopes he doesn't run into Dan Schneider because he knows Dan Schneider's commenting on these videos too. And also, apparently all the Dan Schneider controversy is over, okay? Because some guy commented that his dad knows Dan Schneider's wife and that he really isn't all that bad. So you heard it here first. Dan's a good guy, good wife guy. And then an egg commented he likes my video, so thanks, egg. One child actor stereotype that I didn't mention in this video that I do fit into is I am broke, I have no money. No, I'm just kidding. Sort of. No, but that's a story for another day. But I do want to say these video essays are possible thanks to our generous patrons, namely Eric, Guy, Bob, and Matt. If these videos have been meaningful to you, we would love to see you on Patreon. You'll get behind the scenes on how these essays are made, along with me asking for your input on what I should talk about next, and a lot more in community. Links in the description. If not, I appreciate you watching and looking forward to seeing you next time. And let me know what you think about the pathologies of child stars. Was there anything surprising, or was there a child actor I didn't talk about that you think fits in one of these pathologies? All right, you let me know, because I'm off to develop a crippling heroin addiction.
I am a musician. I am a brother. I am independent. I am Mitchell Musso.